Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Galit Speaks. I know I took a little bit of break, but I'm back and I'm so excited to be back because I'm here with Anne. And I've spent a couple of weeks getting to know Anne now. And she is a writer, editor, data entry tech, transcriber, and owner of the small business Writing Wisely. Because Anne struggled with their mental issues, they feel called to be an advocate for others who have the same challenges. Anne aims to provide everyone easily accessible ways to improve their mental health. Anne wrote the book Our Favorite Movies: How Films Affect Our Mental Health, and the book teaches people how to turn watching movies into a helpful coping skill. Anne, thank you so much for being here. So excited to talk about everything you do.
Yay! Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about your book and how it came about.
Sure. My book is part memoir, part psychology book, part movie guide, and I talk about my own struggles with bipolar disorder and generalized anxiety disorder, and how throughout my entire life I've been going to movies as a way to cope with my symptoms that have been showing up since I was very young. So yeah, it's my story. It's my favorite movies. It's how movies affect everybody. And how I came to write it was I had been working in mental health and I had gotten burnt out and I was just ready to try something new and I had always wanted to write a book. So I decided to go for it.
And before, when you were working in mental health, was it in the writing field or you were just working in other fields in mental health?
Right. So I was working as a peer support specialist, and that's basically somebody who has mental health and or substance abuse issues and is helping other people with those issues. And I was working on a support line, which is sort of like a crisis line, like the suicide hotline, but for less critical issues.
Wow. So, how did you discover your love for writing and when did that happen for you?
Sure, I discovered my love for writing when I was very little. Sometimes I wonder if like almost the mental health stuff and the writing happened at the same time. But the writing goes back to when I was 7 and I wrote a play about Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And I the play starred Daniel the Striped Tiger, and it was all about, for some reason, the environment and Daniel the Striped Tiger talking about how you shouldn't open and close the oven door very often because that lets the energy out. I don't know, but anyway, that's where it started, and I've been loving to write ever since. And I've had my business since 2017, doing, among other things, the freelance writing.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about your business and what types of things you write and who you'd be interested in talking to.
Sure. So the business, yeah, I started it because, like I said, I wanted to write the book, but also because a friend of mine had asked me to proofread her book, and I had done a little bit of proofreading in the past, and I did it, and I got hooked. So it was sort of a combination of different things were happening at the same time, and yeah, so I've just really loved what I've been doing ever since then. I work on all kinds of projects. I work on social media posts, articles, books, newsletters, blogs, website content. And my tagline is that I'm a passionate nerd about the written word.
I love that. And I love that you are comfortable referring to yourself as a nerd because I think that I know growing up, I was a total nerd. Like my childhood, I will tell you, I had I was obsessed with the library and I created a Dewey decimal system in my house for my own books and had like little checkout cards and stuff like that. So I can say I was a fully a nerd. But back then it was not cool to be a nerd. And so I love that you just embraced it, and now it is pretty I feel like it is more acceptable to be a nerd, and it's kind of cool now.
Yeah.
It definitely wasn't back then.
Right. No, you're right. And I've always called myself a nerd, like ever since I was little. I've always had the glasses to go with the perception. So they were just like rainbow colored when I was younger. I had rainbow colored glasses and rainbow colored braces, and it was a whole look
Yeah.
when I was little. But yeah, no, I've always been somebody who was a misfit, who was outside the norm. And sometimes I was okay with that, and sometimes I'm not. Obviously, I've embraced it now. But you're right; it's more acceptable now. Although I do have plenty of people. If I talk about like going to a science fiction convention, people are like, "Oh, is that like the Big Bang Theory?" I'm like, kind of.
I mean, I get it if that's like the only connection that you have to like Comic-Con
Yeah.
is like the Flash or Sheldon as the Flash going to it. Um, but yeah, I definitely love that people like us are kind of like taking it back and embracing it, and I think that the current generations have opened that up for us a little bit more. Um, because it definitely I was clearly a nerd. I never hit it. But it definitely wasn't comfortable to be like, hey, I'm the nerd about. And I love that you've taken it on as your tagline.
Yeah, it's good stuff. It makes me happy, and I like to represent all nerds out there if I can.
Yeah. So, how did being a nerd and having bipolar disorder, how was that as a child? And, how are you so well adjusted now?
I don't know if I would call myself well adjusted. I'm like, I don't know if that's a term I would reply to myself, but yeah, I think I would call myself more balanced than I used to be. Maybe that's a better term for it. But yeah, like how I got to where I am now, like emotionally and mentally and all that good stuff. A lot of therapy. I mean, that's the number one thing, is therapy as much as possible. I think that's good for everybody. If you can do therapy, if you have the means to do it, if you have the, you know, if you have the push to do it, I think it's something that everybody should do. It doesn't matter what's going on with you. I think it's important. Therapy is important. And whether that's, talk therapy, whether it's art therapy, whether it's cinema therapy, what have you, any kind of therapy can be beneficial potentially for anybody.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about cinema therapy. And can you explain to everyone what that is and how you used it?
Sure. So cinema therapy is basically using movies as a form of therapy. What you do, you can do it in several ways, but the sort of most basic way is you choose a movie based on its themes, or you choose just a positive movie. You watch it, and while you're watching it, you go into what I like to call a flow state, where you're just focusing on the movie, not doing anything else, finding ways to just be there in the movie's world, basically. And after you finished watching the movie, then you want to journal, or, just write down your thoughts and feelings about the movie. One good exercise is to think about which characters in the movie, uh, which characters did you relate to in the movie? Which ones did you not relate to? How does that make you feel? That kind of thing. So, and you can also talk about the movie with other people that who've watched it, either somebody who watched it with you, or you can go online and see, is there anybody I can talk to on Facebook or whatever about this movie. So yeah, so basically that's cinema therapy, is watching movies in a very concentrated state and either writing about them or discussing them with other people.
Yeah, and do you go into the movie with a list of questions that you have for yourself, or like knowing, because you said identifying with like a specific character maybe, are you consciously during the movie picking that character, or just kind of seeing how it feels and who you identify with the most?
Yeah, I don't while I'm watching the movie, I try not to think too much about what's going to happen after the movie. I try to just focus on the movie and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I think most of us we're going to, well, I would say for myself, I tend to when I'm watching a movie, I feel it and I see it, and I experience it. And so, especially if you write about it right afterwards, then you can really go into those experiences and tap into them.
Yeah. And so do you find that that's the way that you normally do it, is because I mean you love writing, and so it makes sense to me that that would be your choice, right? To do you have like a movie journal, and is that how you wrote the book?
Right. So I didn't start doing this until I started working on the book. So that wasn't how I wrote the book. That was um, basically what I did was, for the book, is rewatched about, I want to say, 20 to 30 movies, and I went through each of them thinking, is this movie good enough for the book? This movie have um, very little issues that would show up in a book, whether, like, is it racist, is it sexist, is it homophobic, all that kind of stuff. Um, and is this movie close enough to my heart for the book? So that's how I ended up picking the movies, but I didn't have a journal going in. This was all sort of stuff I learned as I was writing the book and researching.
Interesting. So what are your do you have journal prompts now for after a movie, or do you just write whatever you feel?
I reference a couple of books that are I reference a couple of books in my book, and there's some prompts that I found in those books that I use. That's where I came up with or not I came up with. That's where the piece about it's almost like a grid, where it's like somebody that you relate to, that you think it's a good thing you relate to them, someone you don't relate to and you're glad you don't relate to them,
Mm,
someone that you don't relate to and you wish you could relate to them, and then someone you don't relate to and you're glad you don't relate to them. So it's sort of looking at your shadow
wow.
self, your sort of your positive sides and your more darker sides that aren't necessarily bad, not necessarily negative. It's just maybe the parts of you that you don't like to show the world.
Wow. And then when you have these grids and you have this information, do you then take it? I mean, I'm sorry I'm getting so personal. Do you then take it into your therapy sessions and talk about your shadow self with your therapist?
I've done some of that, yeah.
Yeah, because I think that's a really cool idea, and especially there's I also, when I work with clients and stuff, there's a lot of shadow work that's involved, right?
Mhm.
And I think that talking about that with a professional for mental health, or even just with a friend, can be really illuminating.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Yeah, it's really interesting. And I would say a movie that shows sort of the shadow self is the movie Inside Out, which is my favorite movie. And you get to see all the different emotions inside of an 11-year-old girl's head, and there's fear, anger, joy, sadness, and disgust. So obviously joy is the side that a lot of us show, but the other sides, some of them or all of them could be types, sides that people would think of as shadow self.
Wow. Yeah. So is that movie in the book, and
Yeah.
what other movies made the cut?
Okay, let's see if I can name these off right because I do not have the book down here with me.
Okay, you don't have to say all of them.
I'll do as many as I can. So yeah.
And tell us like why they made the book. I'm
Oh,
curious.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Inside Out made the book because, like I said, it's my favorite movie. It's about mental health. Um, it's a movie that it can make me laugh, cry, and think. So that's why it's in there. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, and that's in there because I love quirky movies. I love movies that are just different and ones that have like special effects that are practical as opposed to like digital. Those are always fun to me.
There's
Uh,
a blue-haired woman in that one.
there is a blue-haired woman in that.
I one of my friends used to always tell me that like I reminded him of that person. Like
Interesting.
who is it? I keep forgetting who it is.
Kate Winslet.
Kate Winslet. Yeah, he was like, every time I see you with your blue hair, you remind me of Kate Winslet now.
and it's just, I don't know, like I just love the idea of people who make such a indelible mark on your soul that it never goes away.
Yeah.
So Princess Bride, which is, so many people's favorite movie, and it is the movie that I've been going to off and on for years for a way to sort of deal with my mania, and my depression as well. So it's something that I've just gone to it since I was a kid. It's been like a constant in my life, and I love Billy Crystal and everybody in the movie, but especially Billy Crystal. So let's see what else we got. Another Billy Crystal movie, When Harry Met Sally, and that's a movie that's my sister and I's favorite to watch together, and we love to quote it. So, and our favorite movies, 10 of the movies that I feature in it are movies that my sister and I watched growing up and in our teens over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So that's where the title came from. Little Women 1994 version, just because I love Little Women, and that's my favorite version of Little Women. I just think it's a beautiful story. Yeah, I could keep going, but
Yeah, I love also that a lot of the books were from your childhood and watching it with your sister. Did how did you like decide on those? Was it because of the emotional connection that you had to them?
um, yeah, it was a combination of the ones that I had a connection with Jane about my sister. So it was sort of a, how I was talking about before, were the decisions around each movie, but I had that added thing, that added nice touch of the ones that I watched with her. So that was an extra layer of goodness when it came to picking the movies.
That's awesome. And then besides for movies, like what are your favorite topics to write about or to talk about?
Sure. Besides movies and mental health, just different human interest stories or things. Um, I really love writing about like people, whether that's with a blog or like on a social media post or what have you. website content. I love to write an about me. Those are always fun. I like to get to know people. That's something that I really enjoy writing about. And I don't think I've had anything I've written about where I'm like, oh, this is terrible. I mean, some stuff is a little more technical, so it's just a little bit more difficult, but I still enjoy learning things and just, getting to know the world. Like, I didn't ever think I would be, writing social media posts about real estate, but then I started working with a realtor and now I know all this stuff about real estate. So, yeah.
Yeah. So what is something that you're excited about writing about right now?
Yeah, so I'm starting to work on a second book, or I'm sort of in the planning stages for a second book, and it's going to be all about TV shows and mental health. And one of the things I'm going to be exploring is fandoms. So looking at both people who are just fans of shows and then people who are part of a community of fans of a show.
Ooh.
Yeah.
And how did you decide on that?
Well, I had been wanting to write a sequel for a while, and I had thought, well, doing another book about movies could be fun, but it wouldn't be as challenging. So I thought, well, I love Star Trek. So, and I know a lot of people who love Star Trek. So
Yeah.
let's talk about Star Trek. Let's talk about some other shows like The Good Place that people are really invested in and they really love. And, there's communities of people all around the world. So I thought that would be a fun thing to write about.
Yeah. And how are you gonna, besides for like obviously Star Trek, because that's something that you love, how are you gonna pick which shows? Is it by following? Is it by like fervor of the fans?
Well, I'm definitely so it's just, I'm just trying to figure out exactly how I'm going to do it yet, but I'm definitely doing Star Trek, and I'm going to look at multiple treks, not just one or the other shows, as many as possible. And I'm going to talk about the fandoms and maybe even do some like studies or research and, sending things out to people, seeing what kind of comments and things I can get from people and put that into the book. So I'm still hashing that part out, but I know it's going to be a trek and I know it's going to be The Good Place. But I want to do a third category, and I just got to figure out which third category, which third series it's going to be, but I don't know yet.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there are so many, and I am interested to see which you pick, because also Trekkies and Star Trek is so different from The Good Place, and like I'm excited to see if you pick like another third that's completely different from both of those, because it's out there, right?
Yeah, exactly. So we'll see, and the trek will be heavy on Deep Space Nine because that's my favorite. But I'm planning on having the first half be like research. It's sort of similar to the first book, to have the first half be like research and some of my own experiences, and then the second half will be cover specific episodes and sort of how they affect me and how they can affect other people.
That's so interesting. Can I make a suggestion? I don't even know if there's a fandom for this, but I'm sure there is. Parks and Rec.
Yeah, I actually have not seen that.
Oh my God. Like stuff. It's one of my like replay at night type of shows where like when I just want to have something in the background and something that's comforting and comfortable. And it's so interesting because it was also, so I graduated from the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Program.
Mm-hmm.
And one of our exercises was to look at characters from Parks and Rec and kind of decide if we would hire them, where we would put them in our work, like how we would deal with them. It was kind of like this interesting exercise on like how to figure out personalities and how to deal with different personalities. And yeah, like that's a great show. I'm just going to make a small suggestion. Like look into it. It might not be like there might not be hardcore fans out there. But it's definitely one of my like comfort series.
Okay. I'll definitely check it out.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I'm not great with movies because we've spoken before and I've shared with you that I did not have a TV growing up. And then I spent most of my adult life working. And even my teenage years, I started working when I was 14. So I did not get to really go and see movies or have movies to be able to play in my home. And so it's hard for me to like figure out what my favorite movies are, but I have, as an adult, started watching different series, especially now that I don't really have cable, I have streaming. And so, like, things like, Parks and Rec and The Office and Workaholics have been something that, like, I've really tuned into and are awesome for me in all different ways, right? Like The Office, I get very uncomfortable in a lot of the episodes, like very uncomfortable. And sometimes like I have to like not watch it. Um, I feel like Parks and Rec. Have you seen either of those? Like,
I've seen The Office. I haven't seen any Parks and Rec.
okay. Yeah. So especially like the earlier seasons of The Office make me uncomfortable. Um, yeah, so it's interesting. But Parks and Rec, I feel like it's always a good time. Workaholics is just stupid stoner humor that I love. And it's like interesting because like I'm not like a super fan of any of them, but I know that there are super fans, and I even like watch the This Is Important podcast, which has the guys from Workaholics on it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So like I guess I have like some super fan tendencies, but I'm not all the way there.
Yeah, I definitely get into my Star Trek stuff, like I was mentioning going actually went to my first convention recently. I hadn't gone before because I was really afraid that they were going to be just mobs of people at conventions and that I have claustrophobia and just a fear of crowds. So I was really worried that it was just going to be horrible. But the convention I went to was a smaller one and it wasn't stuffed to the gills of people. So I actually had a really great time.
Which convention was that? I'm curious.
It was called Galacticon, I believe. It was in Denver, where I live. But it was just sort of all things sci-fi here, and I got to meet Mason Alexander Park, who's in the new Quantum Leap, which and we're both non-binary, so it's just really exciting to meet an actor who's non-binary. So that was really cool.
I love that show. I just finished watching the second season? There's like two seasons now. Yeah, I just finished watching the second season, and that's one of my favorite characters as well.
Yeah, Ian is magnificent, and I got to talk to them, and I got a signed picture, and I got a photo with them, so it was pretty cool.
That's awesome. And So, since you mentioned that you're non-binary, are you open to talking about that?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So, when I didn't ask you before we started this, um, but can I tell everyone how we met?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So we met in an LGBTQ networking group, and like we were in a couple breakout rooms together, and I just thought like everything you did was so interesting and so different than anything I do. And I just, wanted to get to know you more and talk to you. I thought it would be really cool to bring you on here. But you also mentioned today in the networking group that you use they, them pronouns and you're non binary.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to know a little bit more about the process to realizing that and how it affects you day to day. Like, I know at the beginning of this episode, I actually made a mistake and used a different pronoun. And I'm so glad that like your bio corrected me. Because
I'm
like
like, she's gonna get it. She's gonna
yeah.
read it in the bio. It's gonna be okay.
And as soon as it left my mouth, I was like, oh crap.
That's
Like,
okay.
and yeah, we make mistakes. So like
Exactly.
what are, how'd you get to this point and tell a little bit about your story.
Sure. Well, um, I, I've always been different in multiple ways, and one of the ways is that I've never really felt like I was a woman. And I didn't quite realize that was what was happening until I was in college. I went to LGBTQ plus convention that was in Minneapolis, and a person named Kate Bornstein was there, and they were the keynote speaker, and they talked about their book Gender Outlaw and my gender workbook, and sort of opened my eyes to the fact that, oh my goodness, like, wait a second, am I on the gender spectrum here? Like, what is happening? So I I was like fully into this for probably about 6 months to a year, reading the books and just sort of, trying to figure this out. And then I kind of all of a sudden stuffed everything down, partially because I was going through some of my most severe mental health issues. And then it sort of got stuffed in a suitcase for about 18 years.
Wow.
And then I started going to a meetup where people were asking your pronouns. And I'm like, oh, yeah, let me look at the suitcase that I that I packed up like 18 years ago and see, hey, like let's look at this again, and maybe we can talk about how my pronouns are not she her.
Yeah.
So and yeah, I started talking with the closest people in my life about it, and then I ended up coming out to my parents about it, and very luckily they're very cool with it. I mean, like, anyone in your life, they're going to have some issues with pronouns, but they're working on it. And my mom even did a Toastmaster talk yesterday about me being non-binary. So
That's
yeah,
awesome.
it's going pretty good. I'm just slowly coming out to people and determining whether I want to put like they them on my LinkedIn account and things like that. So
Yeah. So what would be like the reason you wouldn't?
oh, it just like trying to explain it to people isn't always, especially trying to explain it to people who would, not understand, trying and dealing with sort of people who aren't being very nice about it, things like that. Um, and yeah, and it's trying to explain it to people who are random strangers to me would be more the thing where I'd be like, well, you can Google it.
Yeah. And do you do most of like your networking and talking to people on LinkedIn?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. For social media, that's where I do the business networking through LinkedIn. It's just, I don't know. It's like, to me, it's a pretty standard platform. It's pretty easy to communicate with people through LinkedIn. So that's where I do my like, and even I've done some more personal posts on there too.
Really?
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
definitely talk about mental health on there.
Wow. It's so interesting because, like, I feel like LinkedIn is where I do the least networking, which is so bad because I know it's like the most professional of the networks, right? It's like the
Mhm.
most geared towards networking. Um, but yeah, I don't know why. I had like a block around it for a while where I went really hard in the beginning and then just like stopped for a couple of years and felt like I couldn't get back into it. And now, I mean, this is live on LinkedIn. I do all of my lives I have on LinkedIn now. And I really have tried since I got into that networking group because that's like something that in that networking group they really talk about the LinkedIn connections. So it's something I've been really trying to get back into. Um, yeah. So what on LinkedIn calls to you? Like, what do you do on LinkedIn?
Sure. So I try to post at least 3 times a week an original post, and then I do various reposts of other people's stuff, and then do lots of commenting and reacting and things like that. And I tend to post about the group that I co-host, which is Movie Lovers, and that's Thursdays at 7 p.m. Eastern. I post about that. I post about mental health. I do like writing tips and information in the news. If I've written a blog, if I've been on a podcast, that kind of thing. So it's sort of like what's happening with me. What am I thinking about? What did I find on the internet the other day? That kind of thing. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And so can you share a little bit about the group that you co-host?
sure. So it's through the Happy Neighborhood Project, and it is a free online group. And basically, what we do is we do movie trivia. We talk about movies. So, like every week, there's at least one question that we pose to the group. Like, every week it's, well, have you seen a movie recently? Did you see a movie in the last week? And it could also be something like, what's your favorite villain from a movie? Or what's your favorite animated movie? Or what's a classic that you think everybody should see? And then there's a lot of just joking around and such, but there's always networking. There's always, this is what so and so does, and this is what so and so does. So sort of a combination of things, but yeah, it's a lot of fun. So that's Movie Lovers.
That's awesome. And it's on Thursdays at what time?
7 p.m. Eastern.
7 p.m. Eastern. Cool. And yeah, do you want to share your referral code with me and I'll make sure that it gets on the post?
Sure.
Yeah, because I recently joined the Happy Neighborhood, um, and it's all about networking and referrals, and there's um, all different kinds of groups. So like we are in the LGBTQ group together. And then I recently did another group I think it was like the business to business. You were on that as well, right?
I didn't do business to business. I'm not sure. Did you do West Coast maybe?
Oh, that's the one I did. Yeah, I did West Coast. But yeah, there's all different kinds of, groups that you can be a part of. And I feel like that's just, it honestly was, I feel like I've kind of stayed away from networking groups recently, and I haven't been going to a ton of them because they didn't feel so good. And I feel like, yeah, a lot of them are just like very, which is crazy because of course it's a networking group, so it's super business oriented, like business oriented and very serious, a lot of them. But that's not necessarily my personality when I don't feel like I can shine when I'm like all business and no personality. And I feel like a lot of the online groups are kind of like that. And the first time I came to the Happy Neighborhood group, it was like there was music, people were like dancing, we were talking, it was happy, like it really is happy. And I was like, oh, I feel like this is a little bit more my speed. It feels comfortable, it feels fun, it doesn't feel like a chore, which I that's what I feel like networking has become a little bit for me.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what other kinds of networking groups do you do?
Sure. So right now, I just went to one today, was a writing networking group, and I do a couple of different sort of creatives networking groups, so those are fun. I go to several different speed networking groups. There's Alex Hitt, Alex, and then HITT. He has a speed networking group that's really big. I think you can just Google Alex Hitt. And then what else do I do? Yeah, like just various people are like, yeah, I'm having an event. I'm having a networking event. I'm like, okay, I'll be there. So I just go to a lot of random different events, and I go to a lot of the different Happy Neighborhood projects. And then I'd have various like local stuff I do as well. Like there's a group that I do locally called the Alternative Business Networking Group.
Okay.
That I really enjoy. So if you're in Denver and listening to this, that's a great group to join.
Yeah, and do you also do, or is that an in-person one? Do you
Mm-hmm.
also do in-person groups?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I feel like those are more my speed usually than the virtual. But because of COVID, like that all stopped. I feel like before COVID, I was doing a lot more in-person networking, and then, COVID hit and everything went virtual. And I think that might be why I just got burnt out on the networking groups, because there were just so many all of a sudden, and it was like so time consuming, but I wasn't doing anything else. And so I felt like I needed to do it, and I needed to do all of them.
So you got burnt out? Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And then I got like just super burnt out on networking, and was like, I only want to do things that are fun.
Well, there's plenty of fun stuff out there. You just got to look for it. But yeah, no, the in-person stuff is coming back. And that's really great, I think.
Yeah. That's awesome. So, what would you like to share with us? Some like final words, or like what do you have coming up that we could support you in?
Sure. Well, yeah, like I said, the Movie Lovers group is a great way to support me. I'll let you know if I start doing any kind of research into fandoms. I'll definitely see if there's anything you can support me there. Yeah, just find me on LinkedIn. That's what I would love. I'd love to get connected with anybody who's listening on LinkedIn. Just I'm Ann Foistel. You can find me under my name there, and I've got I got the first Ann Foistel. They have the tag where it's like linkedin.com/your name, but
Yes.
I'm guessing you're the only one with your name on LinkedIn.
Yeah,
So
I think I'm pretty much
one.
the only one with my name, just in general.
So there's very few Ann Foistels out there. I think there's about like maybe a dozen in Colorado or something, dozen in the Denver area. Like there's not too many of them. And I was the first one on LinkedIn to get the name, so it should be pretty easy to find me.
That's awesome. And what about your book? Where is it sold?
Oh yeah, my book. So you can find it on my website, which is wearewritingwisely.com.
Okay. Yeah, and I put that link also. I put the link to register for the Movie Lovers networking group and how to get to Anne's website to buy the book. So please check those out. And thank you so much for coming out and being so honest and open and vulnerable and sharing all of this cool stuff about your life.
Oh, I'm so happy we got to do this. I really enjoyed myself. I feel like we have a great connection, so I'm really glad we got to do this.
Yeah, I know. I'm looking forward to like more doing more stuff together, and I'll definitely have you on again when you got the next book on deck. Yeah,
Sounds like
because
a
I
plan.
think it would be like really cool, and maybe we can like get some audience members involved and see, if there are any fans out
Yeah,
there.
exactly. Yay. Okay.
Awesome. So thank you all for being here. If you're watching this now or watching this on a replay, and looking forward to my next episode. Hopefully, I'll be back again next week with another guest. If not, it might just be me next week. So I'm back. I'm glad to be back. I'm glad that Anne was like my first, episode back after a few months. And this was a really nice way to ease back into it. And I'm glad that all of you are tuning in and watching. Bye, everyone.